Right. So today there are a number of questions that I want us to look at, and this paper we already started last week, and then again I must mention again that if you have special preferences on any of the question papers that you'd want us to do, please just let me know. I may be posting the paper in the group and then the particular question that you'd want us to do, and then we can make time for that. So I don't think this weekend we are going to have a class, but if we are, I will let you know. I think it's all gonna depend on the requests that I get from you guys. Maybe you might come to the inbox and request for something that you would want us to do over the weekend. Well, today I want us to start off with, I think, if I remember too well, my promises last time. What did we do now? I can't remember what we didn't do and what we did do. Probably not on question 1. Must be stuff that's on question 2. Okay, I think we should start with the quantity statements. Yes, my promise was on the quantity statements, which is now where is that? That's part D, right? Part D, the preparation of quantity statements. And then I believe we did determine the budgeted minimum transfer price. I think we did that, right? So we'll do D and then do C, and then maybe do the actual statement of profit or loss either today or on the next session. Okay. All right. That's perfect. Right. So we are on the quantity statement. So the quantity statement obviously has got to do with process costing, right? It's got to do with process costing. So I believe that should be from, right? Maybe if we can read, I'm gonna ask someone to read for us, say from, right? Okay, let's start it from 3.1. Anyone please to read for us from 3.1. Anybody who wants to exercise their vocal cords tonight, please just read for us from 3.1. Or maybe since we are starting, let me.
Can I read?
Yes, please, Laura.
Okay. Production information. Production begins with the purchase of the direct raw material, tomatoes, from FD and some from the open market, and other ingredients. At the plant, cleaned raw tomatoes are put into the processes followed by the other ingredients to produce the sauce mixture. The raw tomatoes actual usage to yield is 2 kg to 1 liter of fully processed sauce mixture. Other ingredients do not increase or decrease the volume of liters in the process. At just before the 100% completion point, the fully processed sauce mixture flows from the processing plant into settling tanks and it's cooled off to produce the sauce. Sauce is packaged in units of 750 milliliter each, ready for use.
And then here also.
The required raw tomatoes are added at the beginning of the process, while other ingredients are added when the process is 10% complete only. The conversion costs are incurred evenly throughout the process. The process only wastage point occurs at 80% completion and other resulting normal loss is 5% of the input that reaches the wastage point. All lost, all lost liters are sold as scrap. at 1 rand per liter.
Right. All losses are sold at 1 rand per liter. Okay. All right. So this is the information that we need. So we say this is part D, determine the actual equivalent costs. All right. So let's go on the spreadsheet. Right. So let's call that required part D. Why am I typing on the wrong? All right, let's put that there. Required part D. Right. So this is where we are required to do our quantity statement. Right. This is where we are required to do our quantity statement. So I'll remind you of the trick, of our trick as from last week. This is something that will help you get through either an exam or get through an assignment, whatever it is that you want to get through. So in process costing, I believe this was basically done for the most part. It's part of the MEC 2601 syllabus. So it's not really covered much here. So it's part of the things that are deemed to be assumed knowledge. So they simply expect you to apply what you did in MEC 2601. You basically just bring it over here and apply it to slightly complex situations. Right. So what you do now, what's important with quantity statement, with this actual equivalent quantity statement that we need to draw here, is the format, and of which the format, because we don't really have it on MEC 3701 or 3761, you might have to borrow that from 26001. So if you have got access to the study guide, I believe it should be the first study guide, you should get that there. It's very detailed, right? So if you don't have time for that now, you simply want the format, you just want to remind yourself, then you go to the question bank, right? I think we have the question bank very close by here. So what you want from the question bank, you want the format, right? Remember, you are not starting this from the question bank, but you simply want the format, and you want to apply the format there, right? Then what you do, you want to simply come and search that there. So maybe an easier way for you to search that would probably be to go to what you could have already written, maybe on the solutions. Let's just say I'm copying from the question. It's just that this question we can't copy from, right? So because this question we can't copy from because of the way in which it is done, and then it basically means we might have to type, I'll just have to type that there, right? So, but you basically go to what you have written, and then you check from there what you have written, and then you copy it from there. You simply cut and paste it, and then you want to see what that is going to give you, right? But in the absence of that, then we might therefore have to type that, right? So what we want a quantity statement, so we can simply come and type, say, quantity statement there. Okay, sorry. So this is gonna give you, hey, what's with my typing now? All right. This should just about do. So you want to see the general layout of the quantity statement. All right, we do have one here. There you go. So which means whatever you are doing now, if you are handwriting, then you might want to have at least the right columns there, right? And then again, if you're going to be typing like myself, then you can also start copying and pasting the right columns. But One thing that you need to be watching out for when it comes to quantity statements is the two methods that apply here. Right? So you can either be preparing this according to the first in, first out, or weighted average method. Right? So in that case, you might want to check on the question paper to see which one is required. But in our case, we are going to do both of them. Right? We are basically going to do the both of them. Let's see if there is any indication here as to what method is preferred. All right. Where does our question 2 start? All right, there you go. So they use the first in, first out method. So we're going to start off therefore with the first in, first out method, and then we proceed to do the weighted method, just so we are familiar with both of those methods. Right. Okay, so let's fetch the information from there. So this is how this looks like. So you want to have your physical units there on top. So I'm just taking that and copying it. I'm gonna put it on the spreadsheet, the one which you saw me open there. Right. I don't have energy to type this. Right, so I'm just gonna copy. Right, so after I'm done copying, I'm just gonna show you the stuff that I was copying, and then from there we can start filling that up. Right. So you see, this basically simplifies most of your work. Right. You see, so you're not going to waste a lot of your precious exam time thinking, right, over things that you're not really supposed to be thinking over. So what sort of things are those? These are things like formats, right? You shouldn't be thinking about formats, right? You are not really being tested on formats. Here, you are being maybe 2601, you could have been tested on the formats, but here they are not exactly testing you on the formats. They assume that you know the formats, right? Then based on that assumption, they want to see you applying to the given formats or to the said formats, and then from there you can get all your marks. Right, so I think I'm almost done now. I'm probably there. Okay. Right, so you notice that we haven't started thinking, right? We are simply fetching the information from somewhere else, right? As it is. You see, I'm still just fetching information here. Right, this is DM. Right, so on the DMs, which is direct material and the conversion costs, these ones are, you need to have a percentage somewhere there. So all that is based on the format that you get on 2601, or which you can easily get there from. I think it's better to use the question bank, right? It would be better to use the question bank because it's more accessible for you. The problem with that 2601, you will actually have to go through a lot of stuff, to peruse through a lot of information there, right, in order for you to get to what you want. You see. All right. Let's see here. All right, let's just see if what else we need to put in there. Right. So we need our opening work in progress. Right. We need our opening work in progress. Okay. This goes on to the details. All right, put into production. So with quantity statements, these things information will always be the same, right? You are basically going to be asked to do the same thing, just different numbers. Right? So which is why you can safely take format as it is, and then of course after watching out on whether it's the first in first out or what is it, or it's the weighted average method. I wish there was a quicker way of doing this, but if you are handwriting, it's a lot better for you, right? I prefer that you handwrite actually. It's gonna be a lot quicker for you. You know, sometimes in an exam, just because you're in an exam, your laptop might start acting up. Just because you're in an exam, a laptop that has been working this whole time, but come exam time, it starts giving you trouble. Right? So which is why sometimes it's always good to handwrite where you can. Right, we are almost done. Right, that's the normal loss, abnormal loss, which we will talk about briefly when we get there. All right, and then closing inventory. So I'm still just copying this information as it is, and then we are going to fill that in. All right, let's have a look and see where I am so far. All right, so it looks like we might need a bit of space there. Right, let's extend that there. All right, very good. Okay, let's keep that bold. So now we are filling this in. Right, now we are filling this whole thing in. Right, let's sort out our numbers. So this is where now you need to start paying attention to where we are getting these numbers from. All right, there we go. Let's do that there, and then we could as well apply the same thing over here. Right. I'm just doing this so that as we punch in the numbers, we are able to understand and see where there is at least have a distinction on where there are zeros, etc. Right, so now we are filling in this information. Right, we are filling in our information. So back to the question. So where is our question? This is our question. All right, I believe this is where we are. All right, so our starting point, as per the format that we have, we need the opening work in progress. Right, we need to have the opening work in progress. So we are simply going to fetch that there from the question, right? So our opening work in progress is given there as 1,000. So we simply come and put our 1,000 there, and then let's see what else. Right, it's fine. So opening work in progress is 1,000, right? And then we must have also what has been put into the production, right? So we come and fetch for that now, what was put into the production. So actual current input put into the process for the month was 5,000. So we take that 5,000 and put it through as it is there. So according to the format, we must therefore have a total there, right? So our total has to be 1,000 plus 5,000. That's going to be our total there. All right. Easy so far. we are simply applying what's in the formula there. All right, then now we need to deal with the opening work in progress, right? Again, we are dealing with work in progress. Now dealing with that in terms of equivalent units, right? We want to find that in terms of equivalent units. All right, so what do we do now? We need to therefore come and check, okay? So in terms of our units now, it is given as it is 1,000 units, right? Which is in terms of liters, our opening work in progress is always going to be 1,000 liters. But the one thing now that we want to be on the lookout for, right? Because here, right, here we want to calculate, right, we want to calculate equivalent units, right? We basically want to calculate equivalent units. So one thing that we might want to factor in there in our calculation of that we want to think about basically when we're doing quantity statements is to watch out for the normal loss. Right? Most importantly, we want to know where our normal loss occurs. Right? We basically want to know where our normal loss occurs and then factor that in. Right?
Sorry to interrupt, sir.
Yes.
I'm just asking, since they said our opening work in progress is 70% complete, so we don't have maybe to calculate the other thing, or it's just that only 1,000.
So in terms of there are two distinctions here. We have two distinctions, which okay, I'm going to get to that now in just a moment.
Okay.
Right. So if the wastage point is at 80%, if our wastage point is at 80%, then we want to check and see if our opening work in progress has gone through that wastage point. That's what we want to check for first. So this is at 70%. So has it gone through 80%? It hasn't gone beyond 80%, right? So which means that that quantity remains as 1,000 there. Right. So I'm gonna explain now the 70% issue in the context of what you are talking about. So this was inputted into, so what we have here put into the production is for 5,000 and then completed from work in progress. So the output that came in total from our work in progress must have been 1,000. That's in total. So in terms of equivalent units now, for direct material, the cost, because we are using first in, first out, right? Which means that because it's opening work in progress, it means that the direct material was bought during the previous month. So which means that we can't include the cost of what was bought last month, this month, because we assume that it has already been used up, right? So this cost is only going to be included in the previous month's cost, right? So which means here we are going to have nil, and then there we are going to have nil right there. All right. I think I need to take this out here. We shouldn't have any underlinings. And then when it comes to conversion now, this is where your issue comes in. You said it's what? 70%, right? 70%. So the change, right? When it comes to work in progress, you are basically what's changing there in terms of the percentages is the conversion, right? For example, if you are going to be converting milk into amas, right, into nkomas, if you are going to be making or taking your milk through that kind of a process. In terms of direct materials, milk remains milk, so it's always 100%, no matter what you do to it. In terms of materials, it's always going to be milk. Right? But it's the working on the milk that changes, which is the conversion, right? Which is gradually changing. So when we talk of work in progress, we're basically talking about the conversion of milk, which is your direct raw materials, into the finished product. So it's the conversion that's moving percentages there. So which means this 70%, let me write it as 0.7 is what's going to change there. Right, let me write that one a little bit clearer. Right, we want these as percentages, right? All right, there we go. And then we will also want these here as percentages. All right. So take note now. Take note, when we are using the first in, first out, direct materials, we don't put them here in terms of opening work in progress. That was included in the previous month, right? And then again, when it comes to our conversion, this is where the issue of 70%. So when we say 70% complete, it means we are working on it, we are converting it from a raw material into a finished product. So this is 70% of conversion cost, right? So to put it in a different way, we are dealing with, why are we doing this quantity statement? We want to find the equivalent cost per unit. So our equivalent cost per unit, if you think about it, in terms of raw materials, the raw material cost is most likely going to be the same. The only difference, on the only adjusting thing there could be your normal losses or your abnormal losses. But if you bought 1,000 units, it's always going to cost you the normal cost of 1,000 units, right? But in terms of conversion now, right, in terms of conversion, here you are looking at the labor that is being put in. So that's where at a certain point, when you haven't finished, right, when you haven't finished producing something, that's why now you have your work in progress. It means you are still working on that thing, but you haven't yet finished. So what work are you doing? You are not purchasing, right? And purchasing comes under direct material. But what are you doing? Your conversion cost. Now you're putting in direct labor into that. You're putting in your machinery into that. Right? So which is why that 70% only applies to one portion of our calculation there. Right? So which means there we will have 70% times 1,000. So you take that 1,000 there which you have, and then you multiply it by 70 there. So which means this is the equivalent cost, right, in terms of conversions. That's our equivalent cost. Right, and then current production now, let's go and have a look at what to do with current production, okay? Before we go and have a look at that, I'm just going to brief you on that. So in terms of current production now, the method that you use here is to first find what was completed and transferred, and then the balance is going to fall under the current production, right? How so? How so? We know very well, right? We know very well how much we have pumped in terms of opening work in progress, right? And then we know again what is going to be finished, what is going to come out of the whole process. So which means the difference there is going to give us what we produced in the current period, right? Which is included there in our completed and transferred. So most of the questions that we'll have anyway are gonna lead us in that direction. So which is where we come here, right, on 3.22. During the month, PD completed and transferred 5250. So you take that 5250 as is, right? So where do you put that 5250? Right there. 5250, right? You put that there. All right. So because there's going to be a balancing there, some balancing thing, some balancing figures there, then it means what was completed from the current production is going to be the difference between 5250 and 1,000. This is what you get there, right? So if you like, then you might want to be showing the workings there, where you're going to be writing current production, and then you put in brackets what you did there, which is 5250 minus 1,000, which is basically the balancing figure there. All right, so this amount there is going to be the same as that amount, right? This is basically going to be the same. So we are saying in our production, in terms of direct materials, from what we produced, what we produced and or from what we completed and transferred. Some of the units were coming from our opening work in progress, which is what we bought during last month, right? So if what we bought last month was 1,000 liters, and then we managed to complete 5,250, so which means from what we bought in this particular period, it's going to be the difference there, which is 5,250. So we already said, because it's first in, first out, we are only dealing with what we bought now, right? We're only dealing with what we bought now. What we bought the previous period, we're not going to include that. So this is why now we are going to have that 5,250, sorry, that 4,250 coming in, and then there we are having nil, right? So because this was completed, obviously it's going to be 100%. And the trick again is, in terms of direct materials, these are always going to be 100% all the time. Direct materials, for the reason that I gave you, you bought a certain number of liters. So in terms of your cost, then it's going to be 100% of that cost. So which is why you have that there as 100% in terms of the equivalent units. All right, and then from there you jump to this one here, right? This is also still just the same, because this is processed and finished, right? This is still processed and finished. So in terms of conversion, this is completed. So it's going to be 100%. So in
Sorry,
terms of
sir. You said, why do you have 100%?
So this first 100% here for the direct materials, this is in terms of our equivalent cost, right? We are calculating our equivalent cost, and then we're looking at a situation where our goods are being transitioned from raw materials into finished products, right? So we are trying to cost that in between, right? We are basically trying to find the cost in between. So here, because this has been completed, right? For direct materials, it has been completed, and never mind the fact that it's been completed. I already said with direct materials, it's always going to be 100%, because material is material, right? In terms of what you bought. For instance, if you go and buy, let's say you are making shoes, right? Then you go and buy leather from a certain farm, right? You take that leather, and then let's say that leather costs you 50 rand per 10 centimeters, right? That leather costs you 50 rand per 10 centimeters. You take that leather and you start working on that leather. It won't change the cost of your raw materials, the fact that you are still working on it. So which is why your raw materials is always going to be 100%, right? No matter what you do on that leather, the cost of that leather is always going to be 100%, right? But in terms of conversion costs now, this is where we are saying, okay, these guys have started working on this leather. They've started tanning, doing whatever it is that needs to be done, cleaning it up. Now they are 70% to completion. So which means in terms of costing that, we are basically saying at this point, they were 70% to completion. So which is why when we are doing that equivalent cost calculation, we factor in that issue 70%. Here it's 100% because this one was completed, right? From the current production, we are dealing with something that has been completed now. So remember where this 4,250 is coming from. It's coming from the completed and transferred. So we are saying part of what was completed and transferred was opening work in progress. And when it was opening work in progress, it was what? It was 70% there. And then now that it's completed there, it has to be 100%, right? It basically has to be 100% there. So what we do now, we then therefore add those two amounts there. So of which there it's going to be 0 plus 4,250. So this is obviously 100%, right? And then here we can add these two amounts, which is the equivalent cost, sorry, the equivalent units of work in progress, and then of opening work in progress, and then the current production, which was completed, right? So these two were completed, then this is what we have from here, right? Now we need to factor in the normal loss, right? The normal loss. This is where now we need to read again and see where does our normal loss occur? Right, where does our normal loss occur? So the conversion costs are incurred evenly throughout the process. The process only wastage point occurs at 80% completion, and it results in a normal loss of 5%. All right. So let's see now which of these units have gone through the normal loss and then which ones. Oh, sorry, I didn't share. Okay. Okay, yes. Okay, yeah. I thought I had not shared the screen. All right, so let's have a look now and see which of these units have gone through the normal loss point, right? The normal loss point, and which ones have not gone through the normal loss point. So in terms of that, we are basically asking ourselves which ones are going to go through the normal loss in this particular month that we are dealing with, right? So the opening work in progress is 70% complete. So we already did this one. So if it's 70% complete at the beginning of the month, and then our wastage point is 80% to completion, so it means that this opening work in progress has not gone through the normal loss, right? Because it's still at 70, the point there is 80%. So we are still before. And then we are looking at two things here: opening work in progress and closing work in progress. Those are the important things in terms of determining what we want to include in our normal losses. And then closing work in progress is 90% completion, 90% to completion. And then our normal loss point is 80%. So it means closing work in progress has already gone through that 80% point. So this basically means that everything that we put into the process this month basically went through the normal loss, right? Starting with the opening work in progress, because it was 70%, so it was before getting to 80%. So which means it's going to incur a normal loss this month. And then the closing work in progress is at 90%, so which means it incurred a normal loss again this month. So basically, all our inventories went through the normal loss when this particular period. Right? So how do we calculate that now? So what is all our inventories? So all our inventories in total is 6,000, right? That's all our inventories in total, right? So which is what we had there, that 1,000, and then what was put in, which is what was put in there, which is at 5,000. So in total, we basically put in 6,000, right? We basically put in 6,000 there. All right, so what is the normal loss? So here I can put a calculation for that because of how important this one is. Right, so we are told that the normal loss has to be 5%, right? So let's say 5%. So we want 5% of all that went through the production process. So here there is no need to show much calculation, but I'm just going to show it again for the sake of where there is going to be a difference there. And so our normal loss is basically 5% of 6,000. So what is normal loss? A normal loss by definition is something that is part and parcel of the production process. Let's say what are we doing here? We are doing something that's got to do with liters, right? I can't remember what it is that we are trying to process here. But a normal loss, for instance, would be something that causes this to evaporate, and it's within the process, it's unavoidable. So we call that a normal loss. It's part of the whole production process. So we refer to those things as normal losses. Let's say sometimes it could be as a result of spillages and whatever. I think some of the examples that you get from your textbook is when, say, you are dealing with stuff like fuel. Let's say fuel. There will be spillages along the way, there will be evaporations along the way. So what you put in is not going to be the same as what you take out of the system or of the process, out of the whole process. So you factor that in as a normal loss, right? So what is the normal loss here? because we said all our inventories basically went through that process when this month. So we take all our inventories and we multiply by 0.05. Where is that 0.05 coming from? It's the 5% normal loss, where they said all inventories that get to 80% are subject to 5% normal loss, right? And then, right, because it's a normal loss, okay, I'm just going to show you one thing. Then maybe let's put in the other easy one. Closing work in progress. Closing work in progress is 400, I believe. Right, closing work in progress is 400. So we can as well put our closing work in progress there. It's 400. Right, and then we already said in terms of direct materials, material is material. So it's going to be 100%. But in terms of conversion, we are told this is at 90%. So that at 90% in terms of conversion, to get the equivalent units, you are multiplying your 90% by 400 there. So this is what is going to give you 360 there. This is where you get your 360 from there, which is your equivalent units. Right, then 90% is given. Right, so in terms of our normal loss, right, because this is part and parcel of our production process, we are not going to put any equivalent units there for our normal loss. So let me put that as, let's make it gray, a little bit gray there. I'm going to explain that in the end, why we are going to have this part here shaded, right? But at the end of the day, this is all supposed to total up to 6,000 there, right? This is all supposed to total up to 6,000. So if there is a change there, then it means it's going to fall under your abnormal loss there. If it's not balancing, then your abnormal loss is your balancing figure. All right, let's see what the abnormal loss would be there in terms of units. All right, so our abnormal loss is going to be 6,000. So, okay, 6,000 minus 400 minus 300 minus 5250. You can already see that this is not going to balance. You're going to have a balancing figure there. So this is 6,000 minus 400 minus 300 minus 5250. So now when you total these up, it should give you 6,000 there. So which means we have an abnormal loss of 50 there. We have an abnormal loss of 50. Okay. So where does this abnormal loss occur? So it must occur at the same point as the normal loss. But in terms of units, again, we keep that at 100, right? We keep that at 100. But when it comes to our conversions there, the normal loss occurs at 80%. So we are going to have that at 80%. And then that's there times 50. So we're going to have that one at 40. All right, and then here it's still 400, right? I forgot to fill that up, sorry. So we underline that, and then we underline that. Now we want the total of what's there and the total of what's there. So this is basically going to give us our equivalent units, right? This is going to give us equivalent units. So it's 4250 plus nothing there plus 50 plus 400, right? We have that there. All right, so this therefore becomes our solution for equivalent units. But where do we take that to now? Where do we take that information to? Right. So let's not lose track of what the question wants now. So the question wants us to calculate, determine the equivalent cost per unit. So what we found now is the equivalent number of units. what we need now is the equivalent cost. Right. What we're gonna need is the equivalent cost. All right, so we've done that using the actual quantity statement, which is what we are doing there. So let's find the costs now. Let's find out what the costs are. All right, so raw materials put into production in the current period are given as 62.50 there. And then the conversion costs for the current period are given there as 59,820. Let's see if there are any adjustments that we should make there on those amounts. All right, and then 88,000 of the opening work in progress value relates to conversion costs. Right, 8,000 of the opening work in progress. So, right, so which is there our opening work in progress. So the amount there is 8,000. Right. So it relates to what? So 8,000 of the opening work in progress relates to our conversion cost, and the balance is going to relate to our direct materials. All right. So this is fairly easy to deal with, right? And then, right, some of the completed and transferred, okay, the selling price is that there's no opening for finished products. All right, so let's start off with raw materials, right? The cost of raw materials. So the cost of raw materials is pretty straightforward. Right, the cost of raw materials. Right, so in terms of raw materials now, from what we calculated now, it's fairly easy to see, right? It's fairly easy to see that the only cost that we need for raw materials in this current period is a cost that excludes the opening work in progress. So which is what we have there. So we have already excluded that work in progress. So we simply take that 4,700 as the unit, and then we take the full cost of raw materials. So what is the full cost of raw materials? Let's just check that again. So the full cost of raw materials that we put into production in the current period is what? 62 and 50, right? 62 and 50, right? And then, so which is the cost of these ones here? This 3,000, sorry, this 5,000 it was. So the cost of these 5,000 liters was 62.50 because that's what was put into the production. Okay, so it's gonna be 62.50. Right, so it's 62 divided by the equivalent unit. So we are not taking 5,000 now. Why so? Because we are factoring in the issue of okay, so we're gonna have 4,700 there, right? Why so? Because we are factoring in the issue of normal losses, etc. Some of these adjustments that we are dealing with here. So we are factoring all that in. So the right way to calculate that is to use the equivalent units there, which is 4,700, the one that you calculated, not per se the 5,000 that you had there on the question. Right, so this should basically give us 62,050 divided by 4,700. So that will give you 13.20 there. Right, and then conversion costs. Our conversion costs. Right, let's just write it there as conversion. Right, let's have a look now and see. All right, so 8,000 of the opening work in progress relates to the conversion costs. All right, so 8,000 of, let's go and see where the conversion costs are. All right, so this is where you go. So which means so far at this point, we have incurred 8,000. Right? We have incurred 8,000 there, but we haven't finished that. right? We haven't finished that. So which means for the current period, we are going to have 8,000. And then to that 8,000, we want to add the conversion costs for the current period, right? We want to add that to the conversion costs of the current period. So it's going to be 59820. Right, let me put that there. All right, maybe let's write it like this. All right, 59820. Right, and then we want to add the 8,000 conversion costs there. Right, you can see that conversion costs are included right there, even from the opening work in progress, but having been adjusted for that in terms of equivalent units, having been adjusted with that 70% there. And then the answer there, we want to divide by 350. So how you present this is basically going to be up to you, right? So 59820, right? So let me 59820 plus 8,000, then we are dividing that by this amount here. So this one gives us a 13 straight. So now we have the equivalent cost per unit, right? So what's important for you to grasp here? I see it's after 8 now, so we should be completing this. So what's important for you to grasp here? Number one is the issue of normal loss, right? The issue of normal loss, to understand where the normal loss occurs, as in at what point does the normal loss occur, of which in our case here it was 80%, and then what the implications are in terms of what has been put into the production and the opening work in progress. So in other words, you want to check if your inventories have gone through the normal loss in this current period, or in the previous period, or in the next period. So this will be different. Let's say, let's redo this calculation here for normal losses. Let's take it out. Right, suppose we don't have anything there. We are still at that point. And then we don't have this here again. Right, so this still occurs at 80%. So suppose the work in progress, opening work in progress, is fine at 70% there. Let's say this here was 65%. Our closing work in progress was 65%. So it means the month ended without this inventory going through the 80% normal loss period. Right? So which means that this inventory would therefore have to be excluded from the calculation of the normal loss for the current period. So your calculation would be different there. You would have 6,000 minus 400, right? Why so? Because this 400 is not going to go through the normal loss period. So you basically take that there as 6,000 minus 400, and then you're multiplying that by 0.05. So your normal loss would instead be 280. So what difference does it make? This is going to give you a different amount there for your abnormal loss, right? Your abnormal loss is going to be a different amount. Oops, sorry, I calculated this wrong. I believe it's supposed to be 6,000 minus 400 minus 280, and then minus 5250. So this is going to give you a whole different amount there, just by the slight change on that. Then if this was, suppose this again was, our normal loss is at 80%, suppose this was 85, okay, it means that it went through the normal loss period when in the previous month. So which means we again come and make an adjustment here, and we don't have to include that, we don't have to include those units there. So it becomes minus 1,000 there. So which means our calculation for normal loss could be different again. There will be minus 1,000. So that's what, those are the things that you are checking for there, most important. And then, because this is a balancing figure, sometimes it does not have to be positive. Sometimes it becomes negative there. And then when it becomes negative, there is it becomes an abnormal gain, right? It becomes an abnormal gain there. All right, I think we'll leave this here. So on the next part, so I'm not gonna delete this. So on the next part, I'm just gonna show us how to deal with since this is first in, first out, we're going to deal with the weighted average method. We see what's different there on the weighted average method. And then the one other thing that I did not factor in this question, which I'll show you how to factor that in on the next period, would be all lot liters are sold at a scrap of R1 per liter. So we want to see where we make that adjustment there, either on the raw materials or on the conversion costs, where we need to make our deduction there. All right.